People who had an affair while in a relationship. How did it begin, how did it end, and what did you learn? Not me, but my sister was unwittingly the other woman. She found out when they went on vacation, and the wife called her and informed her that he was married with 4 kids. To add to the creep factor, his wife had just recently given birth and he named the child after our younger sister. I was the one cheated on. We were engaged to be married, wedding would have been last weekend. She went away on an internship for the summer, came back, used me as a pack mule all day to help her move in, and then broke up with me. Found out she was dating the other guy about 3 months before she ended things with me. I spent about a year seriously depressed and just wanting to give up. Things are much better now, and in about an hour, I will be going on my first date since, smiley face, wish me luck. Edit, the date went really well. We had to make some quick changes on the fly, due to hometown hockey team's opening game tonight, but I think in the end it all turned out well. We were both a bit nervous since neither of us had been on a date in a while, but once we got comfortable things ended up being an enjoyable evening. Thanks for all of the encouragement, it's great to have some. And for those in similar situations, keep your head up. It's rough, and it will stay rough, part of that person will be with you for a long time, but if I can come out of it, when I was already struggling with depression when I was dumped, I think anyone can. Best of luck to all, and finally thanks to whoever gave me gold. I've never met anyone that could top my story. I have enough tormented details I could easily write a book about it. Let's see how far we can go on the 10,000 limit. I married young, we were high school sweethearts that married a couple years after I graduated. We had dated for 4 years prior to getting married, and had even lost our virginity to each other. We had a very strong emotional bond, and a lot going for us in terms of loyalty. All things considered, it wasn't that bad of a deal. I was financially stable with a solid career, and always wanted to have my kids young, retire early. Fast forward 13 years. We were living what could be considered the good life for most. We had 3 children who are amazing. I had built an excellent business clearing $250,000 a year, which took a lot of time. My family wanted for nothing, Disney World vacations every year, huge birthday parties, nice cars and house, etc. We even somehow were able to keep our kids very well grounded, and not enormous brats. Disaster first struck when my wife started insisting that I start working less from home. I had worked full-time from my home office and helped raise our kids while she was going to different schools / starting her little project businesses. I was a bit of a stay-at-home dad, and also the full-time breadwinner. We had been having minor type of arguments, and this seemed like an odd request, but since our youngest was now in school I thought fine, and obliged. Her first of many affairs was with my best friend. Prior to her affair, this wasn't your run-of-the-mill best friend. I knew him since puberty basically, long before my wife even. I actually supported him and his wife and kids, and even his parents for most of my adult life. He was kind of a screw-up that couldn't keep a job. But hey, that no fucks given was part of his charm. I was the second to last person to speak to his father when he was on his deathbed, put me in front of his kids including the best friend. Last was his wife, to ask me to take care of the family when he left because he couldn't even trust his own son. I paid for the funeral as well as helping get best friend's mom and sister affairs in order, cars, new housing, etc. To be betrayed by not only your wife for over 13 years, and only soulmate for closer to 16 years, but also your friend that you had literally helped every day of his life was absolutely soul-crushing. There are so many shoddy details that I've lost track. One example, when I first suspected these marriage problems I was taking friend out for beers. I paid, he's a loser, a couple times a week to discuss how I could save things and get her to wake up. When I mentioned to him that I was devastated that she finally admitted she wanted to sleep with other people, it was actually a sly message from my wife to my friend giving him the green light. I am a very logical and reasonable person. I was destroyed inside. I decided that it was a better life for my kids to try and move past this, and so I went to counseling with the wife. It went on for months and there never was anything useful, just a lot of denials and blame. The recurring theme was that I worked too much, at most 10 hours a day, while watching our kids. The nagging question of why was difficult to struggle with, and I ended up on a lot of antidepressant medications that were horrible. I eventually committed to staying in the house, putting on a front and never touching that woman again. That was until after about 4 subsequent affairs. Something about me died each and every time, and on the 5th affair I had literally nothing left for her, let alone anyone. She had managed, over the course of 2 years, to destroy every single shred of good memories, hope or love I had for her. It hit me almost as suddenly as when I learned of the first affair. I didn't care anymore. I had no jealousy. She could frock someone in front of me and I would laugh at not having to deal with her. I was done and let her know. Of course we all say things like this is the last time. When that day came that she saw it in my eyes that I meant it, her world ripped apart. She was so sure of being able to keep her dual life, that it was like watching a flower wilt in time-lapse footage. I felt mildly vindicated that I could take something away from her, but mostly just relief, that I was moving that emotional trauma from bleeding to bandaged. Although those wounds may never fully heal, they aren't growing in depth and veracity any longer. This is the moment she broke both mentally and physically. Karma had started to catch up to her medically. Unfortunately, that is just the beginning when you have kids, and the divorce wasn't very nasty as I told her to keep whatever she wanted, and she did. She laughed with her different boyfriends through texts, depending on which affair we're talking about at the time, that she was going to get my money and they would be happy together, etc. She did get my money, and I told her very clearly, you can take it, this is your final prize from me. You see, I made this lifestyle you lived and I can do it again. You've got to make this last and it won't last long, and it didn't. She's already run out of money and turned to other means of living. Things were quiet for almost a year after. It was no secret she wanted me back desperately, but as above, I had more care for a stranger than her, and that would never change. We certainly didn't talk, but she was reasonable when trading custody of kids and the like. Then she found out I had a girlfriend and all hell broke loose again. She spent the following 18 months harassing me by taking me to court for frivolous means, have won them all. She would call CPS on me with false claims every 90 days, to which my kids had to endure state employees asking them about bad touches, visits to my home to make sure I have food, etc. I even have had APS, Adult Protection for Mentally Ill, Disabled, etc., called on me a few times. False police reports, 2 attempts at a restraining order, all denied. Even though I win all these battles, it costs me money and time and my kids emotional trauma. You might think she's done with her tricks, but no. She ends up marrying my only brother, who is mental and partially disabled. This was her absolute, I hope, last ditch to get my attention. Now I have lost my only brother and my kids are confused as to who their uncle or stepdad is. I can go on for hours about how devastating this is as well, but I've rambled enough. I raised my brother from the time he was in high school on my own. I got him his first car, his first place to live, kept him from killing himself many times, etc. Imaging that betrayal on top of it all, much of which I didn't detail. Yes, I married the Antichrist. Oh, and her karma I mentioned. She was diagnosed with both cancer, and a non-curable disease that will leave her wheelchair-bound for life in the next 15 years or so. Meanwhile, I've gotten back on my feet, grown my business over 5 times larger and the future is bright on many fronts, others are forever tarnished. I will never in my life trust a woman again. A couple girlfriends post-divorce cheated as well. I don't understand it, and never will. It seems so simple to me to simply break off one relationship before another. I will survive on a human level, but I am devoid of emotion at this point. I walk around still trying to pick up the pieces of my heart from my past, but I don't think I'll ever find them. I consider myself ruined. TLDR, I married the Antichrist. Please do not cheat. I can give a slightly different perspective. I was the guy that a girl cheated with. I did not know she had a boyfriend at the time, but basically I met her at a party that her boyfriend was at apparently, and asked her out later. She said yes, and we just started dating for 6 weeks. She kept making excuses for time that I assumed were cultural differences. She is Asian. About 6 to 7 weeks later, I broke up with her. Within that next week, she tried getting back together with me twice. A week after I broke up with her, I was invited to a party, and once I got there, I was told someone had to talk with me. Turns out it was the boyfriend, and he just kinda asked me questions about it. Once he understood that I had no idea that they were dating, he said thank you and left. I have no idea if they broke up, but if I were to bet on it I would say they were back together. He was whipped, which kind of makes me understand why she cheated with me. She kept saying how I brought the excitement back into her life. They had been together for 2 years. I felt guilty for about 2 weeks, then I moved on. Edit. People have been telling me I should not feel guilty. I agree, consciously, I felt no guilt. However, I tend to run high on the empathy meter, so that's why it stuck for me so long. The guy just looked destroyed when he confronted me. My husband and I were newlyweds, and he wouldn't have sex with me. After months and months of trying to figure out why, he finally told me that he just wasn't attracted to my body. I'm 5'6", fit, and curvy. I was in the best shape of my life on my wedding day. He said that he was into more of a thin runner's body. It broke my heart. He said he married me knowing what I looked like naked, but hoping I would change. Not possible or cool. I loved him with all of my being, so I joined a gym and got a personal trainer. After my sessions were over, he still wasn't into my physique. I then suffered awful depression and anxiety. None of my medications were helping, so I suggested smoking weed. He forbid me from doing that, but I did it anyways behind his back and it actually helped. I told him about it after 2 weeks of smoking, which led to his complete distrust and disrespect of me. I confided in my dealer quite a bit. We knew each other from high school, and felt so beautiful in his eyes. We kissed one night, but I didn't feel comfortable with cheating. Then one night, my husband stole and hid my pipe, refusing to give it back. We got into a yelling match, he accusing me of giving him no respect, and me responded with a "you don't deserve it." Then he hit me in the face, and I left. I slept with my dealer, and it was amazing. I told husband about it, then after months of therapy, I left and divorced him. TLDR. Husband wasn't attracted to me, so I had an affair with my drug dealer. This happened to my parents. My brother and sister were friends with another pair of brother and sister throughout most of their middle school years, and some high school. The brother and sister, we'll call them Brian and Leslie, they had the ideal life. Their parents spoiled them. They had a great big house and always had great birthday, Halloween, and Christmas parties. My family and I were over there all the time, so obviously my parents got to know their parents very well. Brian and Leslie's mom, we'll call her Beth, worked with my dad at the university. She'd grown quite fond of me. I think I was 8 to 9 when I first met her. She always invited me over for sleepovers and cookie baking days. She'd buy me toys and clothes. I was over there more than I was home some weeks. One night she told me I could call her my stepmom since we spent so much time together. I thought nothing of it, of course. I loved her. Fast forward a few months and it's August. Beth came over to ask my dad to help her with something. My dad sent me outside to grab something from his truck, and when I came back inside I saw my dad hugging Beth with his hands on her butt, the thumped apart really quickly. It's pretty obvious now what they were doing, and why my dad sent me outside for some random task, but being so young I didn't realize what they were actually doing. It's upsetting that my dad would do that. Anyways. Over the course of a year Beth is always calling my dad and asking him to come over and help with random things. My brother and sister still go over to their house to hang out, and Beth still invites me over for cookies and sleepovers. I eventually decline more and more because I started feeling uneasy around her, and I saw how much it upset my mom that I was there so much. My mom started to really hate Beth, and I never knew why. Fast forward to November of that year, my mom forbid all of us from ever going over there. It turns out my sister and Leslie were sleeping in the basement. My sister woke up because she heard people coming down. It was my dad and Beth and they were whispering and kissing. I guess my sister just lay there quietly until they left, and then she got up later and told my dad she wanted to go home, where she promptly told my mom what she saw. It's vague from here, I apologize, but my parents fought for many years and my mom told my dad to leave, which he did. Beth's husband divorced her and married someone else, and Beth still worked at the university with my dad and would still call him to help with odd jobs. I'm hoping he declined every time, but I'll never know for sure. And the last time I saw Beth was the summer of 2011. She doesn't have any contact with my dad. My parents have been separated ever since I was 13, I'm going to be 22. These days, my mom is still bitter and hateful towards my dad, and calls him all kinds of nasty names, no matter how many times I've asked her to stop doing it around me. She hates his whole family, and does everything she can to make her children feel terrible for visiting our grandparents, and doing things without father. It's been awful for a long time. I learned that people suck, they hurt one another, and become bitter. TLDR. My dad cheated on my mom and it ruined our family. I got married very young. As though my whole life were just a cliché, my wife and I had a vigorous and rewarding sex life before I proposed, and then after we got married she just flat out refused to sleep with me. We slept together maybe once or twice a month at the best times, and then could go 3 or 4 months with no sexual interaction at all. My sex drive was, to put it lightly, much higher than hers at this point, but I did everything that I could to be sympathetic. Eventually my sympathy ran out, and I let her know it was an issue. We were both young, so I can only imagine she was frightened and upset about the situation. She tried to make me feel bad for being upset about the sex. She said that I harassed her. I felt like total shoot, and more or less agreed with her that a relationship should be about more than just sex. But, I also felt that it should, at least a little bit, also be about sex. The lack of physical intimacy was making it so, that there was very little that seemed at all like a relationship. Finally, I asked her if she would let me visit a prostitute. She said no. I asked her if I could sleep with other women that I knew. She said absolutely not. At this point, I should have considered divorce, but it seemed like such an impossible thing to even conceive of. Every time I imagined ending the relationship, I thought about having to face all of my friends and relatives and telling them, basically, that I had lied to their faces. That I had promised to love and care for someone forever, and had gotten bored because I wasn't frocking. I basically felt I was cursed. But the human mind is capable of unlimited amounts of narcissism, so it's not surprising I felt bad for myself. I was having a conversation with a colleague, out for drinks, and got drunk enough to where I actually started talking about my situation. She was not only sympathetic, she suggested we sleep together. I was kind of blown away, but managed to rationalize it to myself. I mean, I was being honest with my colleague. She knew I was married, knew I wasn't interested in a relationship, and she knew that my wife couldn't know about anything. It seemed like a perfect solution, casual sex on my own time, working on my sexless marriage the rest of the time. I cheated on my wife that night. But it was almost too rewarding. Having sex without the crushing pressure of a dying relationship was so enjoyable, I began seeking it out. I was always honest with women. I told them all I was married, that I was looking for casual sex, and that my wife couldn't know about it. Amazingly, some women were interested. Unamazingly, some of them assumed I was joking when I said I wasn't interested in a relationship. This led to problems, many, many, many texts, voicemails, and emails. I had been so obsessed with my pussy spirit quest, that I had not taken the time to think about what an a-hole I was being. My wife looked at my phone, listened to my voicemails, and read my email. She confronted me and I confessed. She responded by saying that finding me out turned her on. She said she enjoyed seeing me attract other women. I was taken aback. This began the most intense period of sexual frenzy I've ever been a part of. I don't think my wife and I left our apartment for 2 weeks, and we frocked on every surface in the place. Then, she had an affair with a co-worker. She told me she assumed it would be okay since I had cheated. But, of course, it was so much different to me. Not just because I was a selfish duck, but also because once she and I started having more sex, I was no longer interested in cheating. She, on the other hand, seemed to have no real interest in me at all. This went on for a while, and then she revealed to me she was having an affair with her married boss, who had a wife and 3 kids. We were childless. She had lied to him about being on birth control, and now she was pregnant with his kid. She told his wife, broke up his family, and left me. This was the weirdest part because, holy shoot, she was a bigger a-hole than I was. TL, DR. 2 a-holes caught in each other's orbit.